I'm Millisa Henderson, and this is Coffee Talk.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department here at Berklee College of Music, and welcome to another Coffee Talk. We're kicking off the fall season, and very happy to be here in our second week with Ben Cody, our senior coordinator. Hey Ben,
Good morning.
and our assistant chair Sheryl Bailey. Hey, good morning, Sheryl.
Hey, how's it going? I got my coffee going here.
You. It's gonna be a multiple coffee day here, and our guest today is our alum, our distinguished alumni, Millisa Henderson. Hey, Millisa.
Hello, good morning. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And Millisa also teaches with us now in the 5-week program in the summer and for guitar sessions. So we're really glad to have you here for multiple reasons today. And you're on the
Yeah,
road.
happy to be here.
And you're on the road. You're
Yes, on the road touring with the Broadway show Water for Elephants. We started just our opening week was last week, and so now we're in our second week in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
That's cool. We're gonna get into that for sure. But I think being on the road is gonna bring up your coffee plan. I already know that you went out this morning to get a coffee.
I
What do you
did.
drink? What do you drink for coffee on the road, and is it different than when you're home?
So I would say yeah. Usually when I'm home, I have been been in the big habit of doing just like a coffee protein shake in the morning. So then you get a little protein, you get a little coffee. There's like this Atkins mocha one that I really like. I also have the terrible habit of, at least when I used to live in Providence, I had a Starbucks about half a block away. So I would make a almost daily trip to Starbucks and get usually the normal is just like a iced coffee, some almond milk and hazelnut. Pretty straightforward. Today I have a iced vanilla latte. There's not much left because I've been sipping on it. Um, but yeah, in the fall, I have to admit that I do love a pumpkin spice latte. Pretty basic when it comes to that, but I don't know. I like most types of coffee. There are few types of coffee that I would turn away at. I'm a pretty big coffee drinker.
Were you always? I mean, because you are fairly young in your life. Did you start more in earnest in music school, or were you drinking coffee more when you were playing beforehand?
I think my dad and I and my sister used to go to breakfast all the time, and he was always drinking just, cup of coffee at the diner. And so I think when I was a teenager, I kind of started to mimic that. And I would say like 16 is when I really got into drinking coffee. So probably a little too early if you ask most people. But I always had to, like, cream, sugar, make it taste like candy instead of coffee. And now I have graduated to the point where if I am in the mood, I will just drink a cup of black coffee, which is something I never thought that I would say. But
There you go.
sometimes, you just need a nice cup of black coffee.
That's right. I think that's true.
Yeah.
um, okay, so the other thing we want to ask everybody in the beginning here is, do you remember your first days of Berkeley? And you've had a few different first days because
Mm.
you were here in multiple contexts, but is there kind of a first that stands out to you? I think a lot of people who are listening are students who are coming here for the first
Mm.
time, and I think it's cool to hear what your first impressions were.
So I feel like it's definitely true that I've had a lot of first days. So I did my first Berklee summer program when I was 15. I came to guitar sessions. And from that point, pretty much I knew that Berklee was where I wanted to be in terms of going to college. So I kind of feel like I worked my way up into like the big first day of actually being a student here, because I did guitar sessions, and I think it was like 2013, and then I did 5 week twice, and then I started here or started there. So I think by the time that I was coming into a student, I was at least kind of familiar with the layout just from like being at 5 week. And I'm a big explorer, so I feel like during 5 weeks sometimes I would just go and like walk the halls to kind of feel out where everything was. But my first day, it was awesome getting there. I remember there was this distinct moment at orientation in the Berklee Performance Center. And so I grew up in Oklahoma. I had another friend from Oklahoma who was coming here for piano and composition. And he and I were sitting in the BPC, and everyone was clapping along to this song that the opening band was playing. And he turns to me and he's like, Millisa, I've never heard so many people clap perfectly in time simultaneously. And so I feel like that was kind of like the big first impression of like, wow, everybody here is so into music and so has, these passions and desires to pursue this just like I do. And you really get, I think, a big sense of community from that. So that I think that was kind of like the biggest first impression, at least as far as being a student.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that about community on your first day because I will never forget the day that you left campus, our in-person campus,
Oh, yep.
in your senior year, right before you
Yep.
graduated, because you were in that senior class
Oh,
that
yeah.
had to leave in
Yep.
March because of the pandemic. And I don't know what it was in the office that day, but we had some kind of premonition that maybe we wouldn't have a real graduation ceremony or what.
Yes.
And we made, we did one in the office. Do you remember that?
Oh my God, that was such a great day. I think I was in Norm Zocher's extended range lab, and I was sitting there with, it was a funk fusion thing, instrumental, like guitar ensemble or something, because we were all sitting there. And I just remember Norm and his like, crazies anyway. He's like, Millisa, you got to go to the office right now. And I was like, what did I do?
Why
Did
do
I,
people always say that? It's not like the principal's office.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah,
go.
but
Continue.
it's like, your teacher comes in and tells you have to go to the office right now. I'm like, okay. And then I just walked in and I just remember seeing everybody with the graduation hat and our little fake diplomas. And I just thought it was the sweetest thing because, I don't think any of us really knew what was coming. Like we had ideas about it. It's like, oh, we'll be off for a couple weeks and then we'll come back. But I think everybody kind of internally had this premonition that something bad was going to happen, or at least I know that I kind of did, especially at that point. And so it was really sweet. And I think all of us who were there really appreciated it, just being able to have something instead of, not that, they tried their best with the virtual graduation ceremony when we ended up, but it was kind of just a bad situation for everyone, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you are listening to this and you're not clear on what we're talking about, we can share this again on our social media. What happened was that day that we knew was our last day on campus, we kind of had a sense in the office that maybe what if we didn't come back? And there are so many graduating seniors that we cared about, and it was really last minute. So um, Ben ran around with Ian Steed, who was our coordinator at the time, and gathered everyone that we could find who was graduating. And we had one graduation hat that work study had had. And we played the graduation music and had everyone come. And then Norm, he he was Roger Brown, who had been the president at the time, and he pretended to be Roger and handed out the diplomas. And we even had like Ian, he played the part of our wonderful vice president of student affairs who makes people exit the stage quickly. And and everyone exchanged the hat. We had people coming from the chair office and also from the other side, just swapping the hat and graduating. And we said everyone's name, and the music actually turned out to be perfectly on cue somehow.
Yeah,
And we filmed it.
it
And,
was crazy.
and then you all tried to throw the one hat at the same time.
Yep. I remember putting our hands in. It's like, all right, high five, throw the hat.
Yeah, I really appreciated too that you all wanted to do that. We had a work study party. Um, we just thought, okay, like we're just gonna kind of try to do the best we can under the circumstances. And I think that
Mm.
leads me to my next question, because a lot of people um, who are listening to this, I think if you're young, you're thinking, what am I going to do when I graduate? And
Mm.
now the world just, I don't know what it is, but it just seems to feel more and more uncertain. And everybody's worried, do I have a good plan? And then what if my plan doesn't work out? And I think you
Mm.
had this great plan. I remember talking with you around your jury and your recital and all the gigs you were getting and all the endorsements you were getting and all the way your career was lifting off. And then talk about a derailment. The world got
Yeah.
derailed.
Yeah. So my whole senior year, I feel like obviously I had some fantastic moments and I'm really grateful for everything because of like the ultimate life experience. But I had quite a few, I feel like, derailments. So in my fall semester, I made a decision when I was in college to get engaged to someone. And I now see that that was a really terrible idea. Not that I think that he was a bad person or anything, but it just was not the right time, obviously, with us both still being in school. And so we ended up breaking up in November of that year. And we had kind of had this whole life plan of we were going to move to like right outside New York City and do the New York City thing. And we had everything planned out. And then that kind of went down in flames. So I was like, okay, I'm going into my last semester and I need a new plan. So my new plan theoretically was that I was going to try to go to LA and do the LA session thing because I've always loved California, you know, reading about all of my like rock heroes, Steve Lukather from Toto and all of these like incredible people. It's like, LA session musician kind of seems like it would be a fresh start, a good vibe. Let's go for it. So up until March, I was like kind of planning, thinking about how I was going to pull this off. When COVID hit, I just had no idea what to do because it's like, well, gigs are gone. Moving to LA kind of seems ambitious in the wake of a giant pandemic. So I was living with my sister in a studio apartment on Westland Avenue. We were crammed in there. She was studying at uh, what school was it? University of Massachusetts, Boston. And we were both in there doing our online classes. We were at each other all the time. And I was like, okay, I can either figure it out and stay in Boston because I'm already here, or I can move back home to Oklahoma, which seemed like the least desirable option. So I was maybe like a month before graduation, 3 weeks. Somebody I think it was actually Ian who had emailed me initially because Marcel Gavin in the voice department was looking for somebody to kind of manage and teach guitar lessons at their store in Westport. Just, small hometown music store vibe. But I was like, oh, it's something, it's employment in the wake of a crazy, pandemic, and it's teaching, it's playing music, sounds great. It worked out. And I ended up working there for 4 years and managing the shop. And, it wasn't exactly what I had planned, but I feel like doing it, I was able to really connect with like a lot of musicians in the Boston and even Providence and like South Coast Massachusetts area. Just, being part of a community who can make music together and, you know, I don't know. I feel like as much as it wasn't part of my original plan, it kind of ultimately worked out for the best because then, that whole scenario led me into getting Mean Girls, the musical tour, which led me into getting here. So I don't know. I feel like my best advice for anything like that, especially when you're coming out of it, is you kind of have to trust the process and be open to any kind of avenue within music, because you never really know where it's going to lead you.
Do you have a sense when you said that experience led you into getting Mean Girls?
Mm.
How did that happen in your mind?
So it's so funny. The music director for Mean Girls was this guy, Julius Laflamme, who was also a Berklee alumni. I think he graduated in like 2022. Fantastic piano player. So because I ended up staying in Boston, I did a couple local theater shows with this company called Moonbox Productions. And it was in like the height of like the resurgence of COVID. I think it was like December of like 2021. I had done Rocky Horror with this company like my last year of college, and the producer of like the whole company messaged me on Facebook and was like, "Hey, our guitar player for this show just bailed or had COVID or something. Is there any way you can learn this book and come in tomorrow and just play for the rehearsal?" And I was like, "Sure." So I did the whole thing. And the music director of that show, it was called Passing Strange, I believe, was Julius. And so, we had the interaction. And then I hadn't spoken to him for 3 years, ever since, like, because we didn't really know each other in college because he was a couple years after me. And, piano composition versus rock guitar didn't have a ton of interaction with each other. But so I did that gig. Honestly, I didn't even think that I did that great because I was like, I got like a couple hours to sit with this book. I'll learn what I can. I'll learn the important parts, and then we'll just try to sight read the rest of it. Um, but 3 years later, and this would have been April of last year, he emailed me out of the blue and was like, "Hey, we're looking for a guitar player for the Mean Girls National Tour. Are you interested?" And so I sent an audition video, and then it all worked out. And then I was on the road with them for 8.5 months. And then the music supervisor for that is the same music supervisor for this show. So it ended up working out that I got this show too.
It's amazing. And it's funny because I think sometimes people don't realize. I think we all feel this way. It's only looking back that you see some connections,
Sure.
especially from where I'm sitting or Cheryl's sitting, where we're much older. But when we look at what you did at Berklee, it makes just total sense that things would come together,
Mm,
because even from the time you were young, you were here, you were present, and you made yourself known, and you were capable, and you were together, and you just presented as the kind of person, like, oh, you could trust that woman to do stuff.
mm.
She'll show up, she'll be on time. And you also really dug into the curriculum. I mean, you're a rock guitar player, and you're known for being a great rock guitar player, and that's what.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. And your teachers are saying, like, this is a person who can really play in her style at the highest level, and also knows the fretboard, and also is working on reading, and also is willing to say, like, what's a week for me, this, let me work on this.
Mm,
And then I think you took a lot of chances in the curriculum, because even just from what I saw, you took my class, you took modern writing ensemble.
yes,
And
which that was one of my favorite classes of the whole time. Just I because I feel like it really put things in a different perspective, and
mm,
I feel like it kind of almost forces you to open your mind and think about music as a whole, as instead of like, oh, I have to play this one genre and do this one thing because it's what I do. And I have definitely come to find out that that's not obviously 100% true. It's like, do it for the love of the music, explore different avenues, open your mind to different possibilities. And I feel like that course really kind of jump started my like curiosity in those ideas, which I think is really kind of also helped lead me to where I ended up today, playing a show that is bluegrass and folk and has one song that has a little bit of distortion. It was funny in Tech Week. It's literally 2 pages of music where I get to use an electric guitar with some distortion. And the music supervisor just kept telling me, he was like, "Okay, we gotta cut down the distortion a little bit." And it was only at like 20% of the way up already. And I'm like, "You're killing me here."
it's funny you say that, because I think that class is a good example of what a lot of different labs, it could be different classes for different people. But there was something that
Sure.
happened, because when you came in that class, you couldn't just be like, okay, I am rock guitar Millisa.
Mm,
You had to approach, like, writing music and playing it and communicating your music in a way where you're just Millisa, the musician.
yes.
And I think that, as terrifying as that can be, it's often very quite liberating to see who you are
Yes.
out of one context. And I think that when people define success or when people define who they are musically, sometimes without thinking about it, they're only in one context. And
Yeah.
we watched you at Berklee in that class, and then in many contexts, just discover like, wait a minute, like the musician and the professional of you is bigger and deeper and wider, or could be bigger and deeper and wider
Yeah.
than one thing. And then I think, honestly, that is, if you have that mindset, then yes, there can be a global pandemic and a whole bunch of crazy things in your professional and personal life, and you can continue because it's not tied to one thing.
Yeah. And I think that was, I mean, like I mentioned, a huge takeaway. And I'm really glad that I had that experience, because I think if I had not been open minded about a career path or any kind of like job in music, I'm not quite sure that I would have ended up where I wanted or where I ultimately am now. Because I just remember, like, even like during my last semester, they offered me the job at the music store, and I was like, I really want to go to LA. I really kind of want to, you know, go out and do a big thing, but there's so much uncertainty with that, especially when you don't have housing lined up, you don't have a job lined up. You like know a few people, but at the time, most of the people I knew in LA were moving back home because of the pandemic too. So it was kind of like, do I want to go out there with a very minimal network in the middle of a pandemic, or do I want to, be open minded to something that could lead somewhere else? And so I'm really glad that I ended up taking that route, so that, I didn't end up homeless in LA or something, because that obviously would not have been great.
I'm looking at Cheryl as I'm thinking of this question, so I'm going to start asking it and then kick it over to her. Because I think that's another thing that people think about a lot. Like, if you make a decision to stay local or to, you
Mm,
say, like, okay, this is a secure option now, will it trap me? You know, I think the answer to the question, if you want it to be no, is you have to keep working on your art and your craft as hard as you can,
definitely.
right? And you also have to keep thinking like, okay, this wasn't my plan. And there's a lot of really valuable stuff here, and I can take full advantage of it. And there's a lot of things maybe I wouldn't have gotten had I not had this job. So, like, find all the good things in your job. And then
Yes,
also, you have to really keep deepening in your skills and keep, and I think you, because of the way you approach the curriculum in the guitar department, you took tons of different labs, you took tons of different ensembles, you were already like saying, like, this is unconventional for me, and I'm going to find something great in it. So it's like you already had this mindset. But I guess my question is, on the guitar side,
mm,
how did you structure continuing to get better and better and push yourself musically when you had a job that was more of like a, okay, I'm running this music school and teaching these lessons? Like, how did you push your craft?
I think a lot of it came when I started getting like high school students who said that they wanted to pursue music. Honestly. So it's like, I at when I was younger, I was like, I didn't know, I don't want to say I loved music theory, because I definitely didn't the way that I do now. But they kept coming to me with all these questions, and truthfully, sometimes I didn't always have the answer for a question about a chord progression, or, oh, why does this little lick work over this chord, but it doesn't sound good over this chord? And I was like, well, I know the answer is shoved somewhere deep in my brain, but I need to think of a way to explain it. So I feel like a lot of just understanding things conceptually came from teaching myself how to teach it, if that makes sense. And so I feel like I got a huge amount of valuable experience just from having different students. And even like, the little tiny kids, you can take them through like the Hal Leonard beginning book or the Berklee beginning method, but sometimes it doesn't always click. So you're like, okay, this is one way to think about it. What if we think about it this way? And just coming up with different ways to explain the same thing so that it makes sense to multiple people, I think was a big like eye opener in terms of my own playing and my own way of thinking, just to kind of diversify that. And then on top of, teaching and working at the music store, um I took as many gigs as I could. I played in wedding bands. I played with this guy, Dave Alves, and we gigged all down through like Newport, Rhode Island area almost every weekend at some point once the pandemic kind of started opening up and allowing music again. I'd go to jams and just try to expose myself to as many musicians and as much music as I can, which I really feel like you learn more by doing than by just sitting in your room staring at the fretboard being like, understand this, understand it right now. But if you really kind of get out there and put it into action, I feel like you start to absorb it a little bit more.
That's cool. Sheryl, as you're listening to Millisa, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm glad you're on the show with us today. And what you know, what's obvious to me, just observing you in your role as when you teach here, is your just openness and love for music. And so I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, you bring that to your students, and but you think sometimes you see maybe some of the students, younger students, come in and they're kind of just in this tunnel, right?
Yeah.
Like, if it's not, yeah, if it's not overdrive guitar, if it's not jazz guitar, what, I don't like it. But
Sure.
as you grow and your musicianship grows, you're like, it's just music,
Yes.
right? So, developing that with younger players. But also I was very curious about your experience, because obviously you're playing all these shows and your reading skills have to be together. And that's always a thing, a point of a lot of fear and anxiety for students, because first of all, they've never, unless they played, you, as you know, or we know, oftentimes we play trumpet or piano or violin, there's a
Sure.
tradition of learning to read from the beginning. And
Mm,
oftentimes a guitar player, we play by ear, so our ears are great. But then
mm.
that thing about reading is terrifying. But it's just because, no one's taken the time to sit down and go, hey, this is how you do it. Um, but as so I'm curious your experience with that, your background with that, but obviously how you help folks, younger people, embrace that, because as you know now,
Mm.
hey, you get a book, you read it down.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do, and not necessarily sight reading, but you have to be able to get that music, that book, and figure out, okay, how I got to place. And yeah, rehearsals tomorrow at 9 a.m. So,
Yep.
how do you, yeah, I'm just curious your approach to that and how you share that with your students, and yeah, like what was your experience coming to get where you are now?
So I'm going to be completely honest with you. I would say, as far as general guitar skills, reading is still probably my weakest point, because obviously I could do it or I wouldn't be here on a musical tour. But, it was something I think I learned when I first started guitar lessons, because we worked through the Hal Leonard book. And so I understood the basics and I was like, okay, yeah, quarter notes, eighth notes, great, whatever. And then I kind of was like, I don't want to learn this. I just want to play. And I kind of had that resistance about me when I first started at Berklee too. I remember the entrance placement theory exam was like, oh, take all these chord voicings and voice lead them in standard notation. And I was like, huh? How? I don't know what this means. But I think as I did more theater shows through college, you just kind of have to force yourself to do it. If they send you the book a week in advance, then it's like, all right, I'm going to lock myself in my room and I'm going to learn it. And then the next show that you do, oh, well, this pattern is the same as that pattern. Oh, you can just think about it as a pattern. And I see a lot of things intervallically when I'm looking at music, and try to think of like, okay, this is where the melody is moving, or this is where the chord progression is moving. How can I pay attention to like the voice leading within chord voicings, or like, okay, this is obviously all the chords are descending, so I just need the pattern within that. So I think for me personally, seeing patterns within everything helps so much. um but yeah, I think, when I did Mean Girls, I think I got the book like a month in advance, and I just sat down. And by this point, I think really the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the more that you teach it to people and you're just exposed to it, it continues to get easier. So by this point, we only got our book for this show, I think 3 days in advance. And I had gigs all 3 days. And they had sent us like loose works of like what the music would be like. So like there's one 3 songs in the show that are open tuning. So they were like, we're not going to make you read an open tuning guitar. Here's a video of the guy playing it so you kind of get an idea of it. So it was kind of like I'll learn what I could, but then day of I'm sitting at this music and I was like, well, I didn't really get a chance to prepare all of it, so we're just gonna hope and pray that it goes okay. And I really found that just by doing it more over the years, I can like sight read things now, which is something that I guess when I was a student at Berklee, even I was like, I'm never going to be good at this. This is just too hard. My brain doesn't compute the way that it needs to compute to understand this. But I think I'm like the living proof of like, the more you do it, the easier it gets. You just have to make yourself do it. And so I think the way that I've posed it to a lot of students, especially ones who are wanting to go to music school, is like, look, to be a great guitarist, you don't have to know how to read. Like, there are tons of great guitarists who can't read a lick of music, but it makes you more employable and it makes you more diverse in what you can play and what you can do, and just diversifies your skill set. So, I guess if I have a kid who's like, I'm not going to do it, I'm never going to do it, you can only break down the wall so much. But I really try to be encouraging. It's like, hey, this is kind of hard and it's not super fun all the time, but it's just one of those skills that if you keep chipping away at and try to look at it from different perspectives, like seeing 3 notes stacked on the line, it's like, look, that's just a triad. Now you just have to look at the key signature. Is it major or minor? Is it in the key? Does it have accidentals? It's like, yes, it's a lot of upfront work on figuring out all the little details. But I think once you have a working knowledge of all the little details, it gets a lot easier to see the patterns and just do it after you've, had the years of like forcing yourself to do it. One day you just wake up and it's like, oh, this is actually not that bad.
Well, yeah, what you're talking about is just learning the strategies, right?
Yes.
I mean, I guess that's the thing is if no one shared that with you, it seems like this mysterious code that you can't break.
Mm,
But as you get that time, or when you're working with your students, you're like, yeah, you can see this pattern here, and this is what music
mm,
is. It's a series of patterns or whatever. But actually, John Boboian one time put it in such a way, because everybody's so geared towards they have the laptop and their phone. He was like, just think about reading is, you know, it's a doorway into all the musical knowledge of the world, right? You can get
yeah.
scores of symphonies and read them and understand them or transcript. Anyway, but he was saying sort of, everybody's so used to like, oh, I'll look it up on the internet. But he's like, what if you didn't know how to, use the keyboard to all the knowledge that's on the internet? It's just that little thing that's blocking you from opening that door. So,
Yeah.
I just I thought I always think about that imagery of here's this portal to all this knowledge. And if you don't know how to work the door, open the door, and it's just a skill, like how do you open that? Or how do you type that in or Google that? Then all the information and the knowledge is there.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I haven't heard that one, but I mean, it makes a ton of sense. It's literally just, learn the skills and then it becomes easy.
Well, yeah, and I also think what you're saying shows how hard it is with guitar and with music because you can have a strategy for a long time and it just might not be the right strategy for you. And
Yeah.
so many times people see like you'll see if you're dumb enough to read the or maybe unwise enough to read the comments on like when there's a book that comes out or someone's ideas that come
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
be like that's a terrible method or that's a terrible way. And it really upsets people or freaks people out when people have find a way to do something that's different than
Yeah.
what they expect. And I think that guitar is one of those instruments where you can feel so comfortable and so solid with one aspect, and then someone says, what about this? And you can feel like a total beginner.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of that is not really about the thing, it's about your response to that thing. And then
Totally.
I love that you're really encouraging people to be open, like go ahead and be uncomfortable. Like that's
Yes,
totally fine. It's totally fine to be uncomfortable and to ask for help and to go to things that are tried and true. Like go to a place that's tried and true, and even if that seems odd to you, why not give it a try? Like what would you have to lose to learn a skill like this?
exactly. And I mean, I think that's kind of been my whole philosophy is I just remember, I don't even remember what year in college it was, but I just kind of woke up one day and it was like, well, if I submit for this audition or this band or whatever, the worst that they're going to say is no. Like it really doesn't have any negative effects if you just try for something, even if it's, super out of your wheelhouse. It's like, I think you really have to get to a point where you can kind of let go of the fear of rejection in a way, because there are going to be gigs that you're not going to get. It happens to literally everybody. And I think the sooner that you kind of have that realization and then say, okay, well, I'm just going to try for everything until I find something that sticks. And then who knows what you're going to learn from said experience that maybe you wouldn't have applied for otherwise because it's quote unquote not your thing.
Okay, so I have a bunch of questions and then I'm going to kick it to Ben. But I want you to
Okay.
just start talking about how your job is when you're in a show, right? Because I'm just fascinated about all of it. So
Sure.
there's the touring aspect of the show where you're playing your parts and you're playing, I mean, obviously it's the same music, right? Like for
Yeah.
a really long time.
Yep.
Really, really long time. And so I want to know things about that. I want to know, how you stay creative, how that interaction is with the other musicians, all that kind of thing. And then I'd also like it if, as a part two, you talk about like your strategies for staying healthy on the road, for practicing on the
Okay.
road, for staying inspired, you know, those things. So can you give us a little insight into what it's like to do your job?
Yeah. So Mean Girls was my first tour. And, well, I was in a band in college and we did like a couple little week tours here and there. And we were lucky enough to get hotels because our drummer worked for like Hilton. So we got super cheap hotel rooms and everything. But it was nothing like walking into Mean Girls. I remember the first day, I was just completely awestruck because we're walking in through the back of this theater and there are just all these huge crates and these boxes and four semi trucks backed up into the bays. And I was like, holy crap, this is the big time. I'm like actually here on like an actual legitimate tour with like legitimate people. This is crazy. So I think it was a lot of like intimidation and like fear of new experience. And so I just really, the first couple weeks of it, I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to play my part. Everything's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And, I think it was the first actual, because we only ran the show one time and then we played it in front of people as like a preview show. And I totally botched one of the guitar parts. And I was like, I'm going to get fired. Everything's going to be bad. It's going to be terrible. And the music director was like, everybody messes up. It's okay. We're just going to keep playing the show and it's only going to get better. And so the first few weeks was definitely like, oh, super stiff, super tight, super like freaked out about everything. And then, after I had played it 15 times in a row, almost every single night, I was like, oh, okay, I can relax now because I'm just playing the same thing. I didn't get sick of the music until we were about 100 shows in. I was like really surprised that I was like, okay, I'm still kind of having fun with this. It's cool. Like, and Mean Girls is a very rock show. So I was still kind of getting to like rock out and jam and have fun. And then we did a bunch of like one night shows where it's like you get there, you pack in, you play the show, you pack out and just one night it, which is the poor crew. I don't think they slept more than 4 hours a night for like 5 weeks straight. It was pretty bad. We had it a little bit better in terms of like the sleeping arrangements and getting more sleep and not having to, break down 4 trucks worth of crazy show stuff. But I think when we were in Chicago in November of last year, I met up. There's this group on Facebook called Musical Theater Guitarists that I joined, and I met up with this guy. His name is Steve Roberts, and he did a lot of Broadway stuff, did a lot of touring, and now he plays a lot with like the Chicago Symphony and everything. And one of the things that he kind of told me in the realm of when you're playing the same show over and over again is that you really get an opportunity to think about the little things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So think about your finger placement. How does your finger placement attack or like make affect the tone of how you're playing something? Because it was also like all the tones were programmed onto a Kemper that was used for the Broadway run, so I couldn't even make the tones my own. So it was really just like drop player in, play the show. Like I had my own guitars and everything. I definitely spent a lot of time messing with my pickup selection just to say, okay, does it sound better on this pickup or this pickup? And then when you do that for like 3 weeks, it's like, okay, I think I've decided that this is the one that I like. So you really get a chance to pay attention to just like the tiny little details that you wouldn't necessarily always think about when you're only playing a show once or twice or even just like a week run. So it's like, you know, taking into consideration the timbre of which string you're playing a certain note on, or which do you play the run legato or do you pick every note? Because a lot of sometimes the guitar intricacies aren't always included in the book. So you get at least a little bit of freedom to experiment with what sounds better to your ears that way. So I think that's definitely how I kept it at least musically interesting. And I did have an 8-bar solo at the end that I was able to like have a little more fun with. But, you know, 2.5-hour show and you only get 8 bars to have a little bit of fun. You really have to get a little creative with how you're thinking about it. Or, you know, it does become pretty monotonous. But at least this, you know, the songs were fun. So it wasn't like a super sad show where like really depressing things were happening all the time. It was like a fun feel good show. um you know, I feel like the band on Mean Girls, you know, everyone was a great player, but we didn't really have a huge sense of camaraderie as a band. Just I think conflicting personalities and everyone kind of had different interests. So I hung out with the bass player a lot, and we would every once in a while jam sometimes, but I spent a lot of time. Sorry, my sister's trying to call me. I thought I put it on do not disturb. Um, but I just spent a lot of time practicing in my room too, because I think the other big thing is like if you don't practice every day when you're doing a show like that, you really feel it in your hands just because it's, you know, automatic. You're getting 2.5, 3 hours of playing a day, but you still have to kind of maintain your hands in a way. I got really big into this is my little wrist exerciser ball. So it's just like a little gyro ball. And you roll it up and then you just shake it with your wrist, and it helps with just like wrist movement, wrist pain. And we were really lucky on both tours to have an athletic trainer who helps with like physical therapy of anything. Because I would say a couple months in, my wrist started giving me a little bit of trouble, but she gave me some exercises, some like physical therapy type stuff, and my wrists have never felt better after, you know, just working with her, taking care of that. Yeah, and I feel like in terms of like health and everything, that's still something that I feel like I'm figuring out. I feel like I got a good basis for it on Mean Girls, but now that I'm on a new tour, we have a better schedule for Water where we're mostly, I think the least we're anywhere is a week. Sometimes we have like a 2 or 3 week sit, which is really nice. It's great if you can book your own Airbnbs and have a kitchen, because otherwise living in a hotel with just a microwave and a mini fridge is sometimes not super conducive to eating healthily or having like your own meals to save money. And it gets really tempting to just do like the Uber Eats thing every night, but you kind of have to be like, slap on the wrist, no, you know, we're gonna have a salad instead of Taco Bell because that's what you need to do and everything.
Millisa, give people a sense of time. So how long was the tour for Mean Girls, and how long do you project this tour to be for Water?
So Mean Girls was 8.5 months. We started in October of last year and ended on June 1st. This one started end of September. And we have, I believe there's a couple weeks next summer that they either are going to let us have off, or like they might book it. I don't know. It's very up in the air. But the whole tour is slated to go for 14 months until November of next year.
Wow. And then in the summer, this past summer, you were here at Berklee for 6 weeks, right?
6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like, what do you do with do you have an apartment? Like, what do you do with your stuff in your life?
So all of my stuff is in a storage unit right now that I didn't bring. I had to bring 5 guitars. I think I placed 7 total for the show. And then we get 2 suitcases and a carry-on, and that's all you get to bring with you. Living out of a suitcase is not my favorite thing, because it's just, you have, both have to be under 50 pounds or the airlines get mad when you fly. But over the summer I was living with, because when I went on Mean Girls, I had to give up my apartment. I was living in Providence at the time. And she was, Marcelle Gavin, was the owner of the music store, was nice enough to let me put my stuff in her basement while I was gone, because otherwise it would have been storage unit or back to Oklahoma, which would have been a whole mess. So she let me keep my stuff in her basement, and then I lived with her over the summer, which was great because she lives in, like, it's almost like a nature retreat where she lives down in Westport, Massachusetts. It was like 10 minutes from the beach. It was beautiful just to kind of have a summer of like, I can breathe and relax and kind of just decompress from the whole first tour experience. But then for this one, since it's such a long tour, it's was easier to put my stuff in storage. So my boyfriend lives in Tiverton, Rhode Island, so I'm hoping to kind of split my layoff time between staying with him or going back to visit my family in Oklahoma. But we really have, I think we're off the week of Thanksgiving, which is nice. We're off for 3 weeks at Christmas. I think there's 2 weeks in May. And then it's looking like most of July and August will have off if they don't book the shows, which it all says TBD on the schedule. So I'm like kind of hoping it works out so I can come and do 5 week and everything. But obviously I feel like a good reason to miss would be a tour if I had to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, there's so much there. Ben, what is on your mind? Because you and Millisa overlapped a little bit here at school.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yes, we did.
So,
Yeah.
so go take it wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, no, I just think you're such a good example of, being very successful and, career. I think it's just especially at the age when you're graduating school, I think it's hard not to realize that, your career path isn't linear. Because I think we all expect it to be this linear, I want to do this and this is going to happen. And it's never like that. And
Yeah.
you always have, maybe one opportunity will come up and you take that, and that might lead to another opportunity. And it's just really inspiring just to really hear your story and see how successful you're doing. And I think this be a good time for me to ask the question.
Ooh, okay.
So we always ask the same question to every guest, just because it's great to hear the different answers. But what do you think Berklee students should be asking that they're not?
Ooh, that's a really good question. What do I think Berklee students should be asking that they're not? I think it really just kind of comes back to my whole idea of just like being open-minded, because I feel like it's kind of like what you said. Everybody has such an idea of like a linear career path where it's like, I want to do this. But I think if you talk to your teachers about their life experience and talk to other students about maybe where they've been, especially with such a a wide student population with kids from all over the country, kids of different ages who have all experienced different things. I think if you really start to dig into the people that are making music and understand how they've all kind of found their way, you start to really open up and see, oh, well, maybe this isn't exactly what I originally planned to do, but it opens your mind to the possibilities of like other directions. I mean, it's just like if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be making money playing bluegrass banjo in a musical theater show, I would have laughed in your face. Like that concept, like when I first started school, would have seemed so ridiculous to me. Like, I'm never going to learn banjo. I don't like country music. I don't need to learn how to play the banjo. But now, through the musical theater stuff, I've had to learn both 5-string and tenor banjo, ukulele, mandolin. I've got an open tune guitar now. I've got a resonator. And I feel like it's really just asking people how they got to where they are and seeing that nothing is linear and you kind of have control over where you want to go, but you have to be open-minded to like what opportunities are being thrown your way.
I think that feeds into something that I was thinking about. We were talking before we started the formal interview about there's an organization called Maestra that helps mentor young women who want to get into musical theater. And so I would bet like people coming that route, and then also anyone who's young and wants to get into this profession, this part of our profession, might ask you for advice. And I'm wondering, what are some things that would be specific to doing what you're doing? If someone says, "Oh, I'd really love to get into musical theater," what would you say?
It's really funny. I have a student who studied with me privately that I met at 5 week, the second year that I taught 5 week, I think. His name is Giacomo and he's sweet, but he had a friend who has just started at Berklee who was interested in musical theater, and he reached out to me and I just sent him this long text. So I actually have all the information ready to go. So I think it kind of starts out, you got to get your reading skills in check, or at least, maybe not be able to sight read, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to get the book at least a couple days in advance, but just understanding how to work through a book so it doesn't fry your brain, essentially having, enough reading skills just to get through the book. And then just start playing shows. Try to find local shows, high school productions, regional productions are always looking for musicians to be part of the pit orchestra, because, a lot of the times it doesn't pay super great, but it's good experience into like the local network of musicians. And, Boston has such a huge hub for like regional theater. I know they do a lot of like summer stock shows in New Hampshire. The Cape Playhouse does it. So there's really a big musical theater scene, especially if you're already a Berklee student and trying to look into that. So, try to meet up with local musicians and get the experience playing in pits would, I think, be step one. For touring stuff, playbill.com actually lists a lot of open jobs when people are looking for musicians. Depends on the company, depends on the tour, but I have seen a lot of like guitarist openings go out there. There's a couple different contractors who will post openings on like Facebook and their like the company's website as well, when they're looking for specific musicians. And, obviously I feel like there's like a horde of vultures of people looking ready to audition for those types of shows, but open call is, it's not as guaranteed, but it's still kind of a way to get your name in the door and a foot in the door. I know the woman who is the contractor for the company Crossroads actually has a musician database that sometimes they'll pull from, so you can sign up and kind of get involved with that. If you're a woman, Maestra obviously or woman or non-binary person, Maestra has a huge network of people who they are always looking for women to help place into musical theater, pit musician jobs. And I think it really just kind of comes down to meeting people within the community, networking, and obviously if you get a show, you need to do your job, learn the part, and come in with a good attitude, show up early and just be open to figuring it all out, as you're kind of going along.
That's great. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
really practical. And I think it really feels like what I'm learning from you in this is you just have to keep working really hard on
Yes.
what you're doing. I think we live in a time now where people are like, if I put in this work, I want you to be able to guarantee me that there'll be this job at the end of the tunnel. And I'm so compassionate that people feel that way. And I think that maybe life isn't also like that, right? But
Yeah.
you can guarantee that if you don't put in the work on yourself and on your skill set, that there will be things that you won't be ready for,
Yeah. And I think another big thing of that is, I've met so many people who are like, I'm just going to keep putting in this work and then I'm going to get this job. And then it doesn't work out. And they just end up being totally defeated by the process, which is like such an understandable feeling. And everybody is going to have days like that. But I think I've kind of discovered that if you're putting in the work for your own personal growth and betterment and for the love of the music, instead of like, I have to get this job or I have to do this, I feel like you end up feeling a lot more fulfilled with it, as opposed to like, I'm chasing this one exact thing and I'm going to be really bummed if I don't get it. But if you say, I'm practicing, I'm working hard, I'm learning so that I can be the best musician that I can be, and I can be the best version of myself that I can be, even if you don't get the job, you don't feel like it's a total loss, because you're still just continuously working on your own musicality instead of chasing one specific thing.
Yeah, and Sheryl, as Millisa was just saying that, I also think that if that's your attitude, then that kind of positivity and that kind of growth mindset, that shows in ways that you can't imagine. So even if someone hears you or meets you and they think, oh, you're not the right fit for this, if you're sort of presenting that way, then what they may learn that you don't know is that they would like to work with you in the future. And that you're actually someone that they're calling. They're saying, we heard this person, and honestly, it's not a good fit for this, but you should be on the lookout for them, or you should be, like, that's the unintended consequence. I feel like when it's so specific, like, I want to get this job or I want to get a thing, there's something about that that doesn't necessarily help you feel like anybody could call you as a person they want to work with in maybe a context you can't see. I mean, Sheryl, how does that sound to you?
Yeah, I mean it's totally true. Also, we learn more from our failures often. You don't get a gig. Actually, it's always been my experience. Actually, somebody said to me, actually, Rachel Z said to me, rejection is God's protection. Sometimes, you went for something and then you didn't get it, and then something, you found out something later. You were like, man, I'm really glad I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
get the gig. But, you might even in that moment, your hopes are up. But I, I feel you're gonna learn something. There's something you need to learn or something you need to look at. And also, yeah, in that way, if you're approaching it that way, I think that openness and that humbleness comes out. And someone might go, yeah, they weren't the right person for this gig, but they would be great for this other project. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think you have to keep you have to s- you have to keep that openness and that spirit of always learning something, and you'll be all right.
Yeah. And I think that even kind of ties into how I ended up getting the Water for Elephants gig. They had sent out the audition towards the end of Mean Girls. And there's one song in the show that is full on like bluegrass, finger picking, crazy banjo. And that, up until the audition is something I had never even thought about. So we were in Kansas City. I didn't have a banjo. I found this lady online who was very lovely and let me borrow her banjo for 24 hours. I tried my best. I think I got a decent take of it. And then I sent the audition and I was like, if it's meant to be, it'll be. Come to find out, they had somebody in mind for the job already who they were kind of like training for the job. So, a month went by and I didn't hear anything. And I was like, okay, they went with somebody else, probably somebody who actually knows how to play the banjo. I don't have any like qualms about it. It wasn't meant to be. About a month before it started, I think it was actually the first day they started rehearsals in New York, I get an email. Turns out the original guy had bailed because he got on a different tour. He's on tour with the Outsiders musical now, and they needed somebody last minute. And so I did the interview and they hired me 2 days later. So it was kind of like, I was bummed about not getting it initially, but I think it still having like the open-minded mindset, it was like still allowed me to grow throughout the summer. And honestly, I feel like having just some moments of peace to really work on, where I wanted to be and who I wanted to be as a player prepared me more for going out on the road again, even though it was kind of a like crazy last minute, hey, our guy that we had in mind from the beginning can't do it now. Is there any way that you can like get on board the train and like come on the road with us? So it really have to be expect the unexpected. I feel like is like the age old thing that really helps with stuff like this is you just have to be on the lookout, but also don't expect that everything's going to fall in your lap and still just continually work on like the ultimate goal of being a better musician.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's a really wise way of looking at it. And I know it's really hard to look at it in the moment. You know what I mean? Like if
Sure,
people are
absolutely.
experiencing difficulty, it's hard to see that in the moment. And I think that it's good to remember what you're saying is true,
Yeah.
and so I guess Ben, as we're kind of coming to the end of our coffee today, what's on your mind?
I'm really happy Melissa was be able to come on to this. It's good to have another rock guitar player here and
Hey.
keeping the rock alive. But I think it also shows too that, and I know we kind of already touched upon this, but really music's music, and I think that it like you said, it makes you a lot more employable when you are
Yeah.
willing to kind of branch out, and the fact that you did that as a student here, but before you graduated, I think definitely shows how much it helped you prepare yourself for that. And I don't think that it doesn't take anything away from who you are as an artist to be able to do it. It can only add to,
Yeah.
not even in a sense of just being employable, but I'm talking about more the creative artistic side as well. It'll only
Sure.
add
Sure.
more
Sure.
to what you can do as an artist as well, than to not allow yourself to branch out and do that. And I guess also too, I had a teacher when I was going to Musicians Institute, because they at the time they still had the like a specific reading lab for guitar players,
Mm.
and I know we've already kind of touched upon how um, guitar players kind of notorious to kind of push back a little bit on having to read. And he had a great quote that I'll never forget, saying he's like, there was no dictator that says, all right, you have to, this is notated music. He's like, this was a tool created by musicians for musicians. This wasn't someone outside of our world forcing us to do this. Like, this was created by us for us. So
Mm.
there's no reason for you to be rebelling against this. I mean, this is part
Totally.
of us, and I think just having that mindset, can kind of help a lot of young musicians hopefully take that first step to just kind of the mental preparation of, all right, this is something that I shouldn't be fighting. This is part of who what musicians are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and think about, to Ben's point, think about how great your tone must be after listening to all of those nuances for 8 months on the road and now for 14 months. I can't wait to hear you next summer.
Hey, well, we're gonna be in Providence in December. If you guys want to come to the show, I could definitely get you all tickets.
That would be so fun. That would be so. Of course, you just invited, like, maybe not everyone who's listening can have free tickets, but we could all
Yes,
go.
everybody. Well, you can all come to the show, but I have a limited number of free tickets. But
That's awesome. Cheryl, what about you? What are you thinking about?
Well, thanks for coming on and bringing your positive energy and all your great advice.
Yeah.
thank you so much for having me. This is such a blast. It's always so wonderful to like be connected to the guitar department because I really do feel like a part of my heart lives there. And just
Yeah.
all the time that I've spent with being a student and now teaching for the past few summers. It's a wonderful place and I'm just really happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, and we're glad to have you part of it too, obviously. Um, Thanks everybody. We're very grateful to all of you for listening. We're gonna keep hanging out for a little while longer. But to all of you who are listening, thank you so much, and we'll be with all of you again on the next Coffee Talk.